Belugas have the IQ of a human genius.
J6 prisoners did nothing wrong.
Did you just say something?
The FBI should be dismantled. Prosecute the prosecutors. All right, I gotta go. Bye.
Julie, I don't mean to embarrass you here live on the stream, but I know how emotional you get over January 6th, how frightened you are. You haven't slept in years.
No.
Thinking about a guy in buffalo horns, yodeling, right? And unarmed grandmothers with 25-cent Walgreens.
Oh my God,
American
please.
flags. Yeah.
Benny, you have to stop. You have to stop. You are adding to my trauma, my emotional fragility over January 6th. It's only been 4.5 years. This could take decades for me to recover from watching Jacob Chansley and his horns and face paint talk to police officers. I can't.
I'm sorry. I don't mean to trigger you.
It's too late.
Oh,
it's too late. Okay.
Well, there we go. All right.
More nightmares tonight.
My
Thanks,
apologies.
Me and Tom Tillis, we're going to be in the fetal position.
Let's
crying about the Indiana Mimas taking selfies in the rotunda. It
is remarkable. Jacob Chansley is such a sweetheart. We've interviewed him a couple times, met him a couple times. He's such a nice guy. He's like wouldn't harm a fly. And the fact that we have a senator on our show, Senator Mullen, we talked about this with Senator Hawley, who confirmed it, by the way, that the senators are curled up in fetal positions, weeping over their memories of January 6th, 5 years out from this unarmed, peaceful protest. And that's what was able to sink Ed Martin's nomination, which was just announced within the hour.
Yes.
What is the current state of Republicans in the Senate, please, Julie?
I mean, just weak, cowardly, ineffective. And this news just now, and the president confirmed it in the Oval Office, that Ed Martin will not be confirmed as the DC U.S. attorney. The president indicating, I'm just watching this now, that he has another person in mind. So this is a scalp for the Democrats, for the weak-kneed Republicans like Tom Tillis and others who sank this nomination over January 6th. It's not that Ed Martin has not been effective. He's been very effective in combating crime in Washington, D.C., which his predecessor, Matthew Graves, did not do. And so this all has to do with January 6th, we're told, because Ed Martin was opening investigations into how his predecessor, Matthew Graves, prosecuted nearly 1,600 Americans for January 6th, including the unlawful 1512C2 obstruction, which Tom Tillis said on Tuesday was a heat of the moment bad decision rather than a systematic abuse of a corporate fraud statute to criminalize political dissent and turn Trump supporters into felons. So congratulations, Tom Tillis. You won for now. Very disappointed. Ed Martin doing terrific work from day one. And, we'll see who the president comes up with now.
So here's the article. Traumatized Tillis could inflict fatal blow. And now we know that he did inflict a fatal blow. Is he compromised, Julie? This doesn't make any sense to me. No human man with any amount of testosterone in his body and bloodstream would ever behave like this or would see January 6th as anything other than what it truly was, which is a federal op against a movement that they wished to destroy and peaceful protesters they wished to imprison for life. What's happening here with Tom Tillis exactly?
Well, in that interview, and I did post the entirety of that interview in my Substack piece, he basically defended the Biden DOJ for weaponizing the law against his own constituents. As I wrote, 49 North Carolina residents investigated, arrested, charged, prosecuted, some convicted for January 6th, including 11 North Carolinians who were convicted of that 1512C2 obstruction. I talked to a woman who's a former law enforcement official in North Carolina, no criminal record, was charged with obstruction, convicted by a DC jury, spent 8 months in a federal detention facility in Philadelphia over what the Supreme Court then overturned last June, the DOJ's unlawful use of that statute against J6ers. So it appeared to me, Benny, that Tom Tillis didn't even know about the use of 1512C2 before Ed Martin educated him and explained to him what the Supreme Court did. Then to suggest that anyone who went in the building that day should be prosecuted. Okay, is 1,600 Americans not enough for you, Tom Tillis? And then jumping to combat the Fedsurrection, which most MAGA people believe, obviously on our side, because there's plenty of evidence already, and Senate Republicans are trying to dig up even more evidence, Senators Grassley and Johnson. So why did he leap to that no one created this or incited it? Well, we have video and court documents and records that prove there were undercover agents and informants in that crowd. So this is part of the cover-up of January 6th. And shame on Republicans again, Penny, for not holding their own January 6th hearings, putting forward their own select committee with nighttime televised proceedings that the American people can see, which is why Tom Tillis can get away with his lies and now use those lies to end Ed Martin's service in the most powerful U.S. Attorney's office in the country.
So you've excoriated and gutted, obviously, the humiliating and embarrassing actions here by Tom Tillis. I'm left with the question, why? What would the purpose of doing this be for Tom Tillis? He comes from a red state, a state that voted for President Trump in 3 elections, a state that had his own constituencies and probably his own voters tortured under the Biden regime. You'd think that if anybody has motivation to find justice for J6ers, it would be Tom Tillis. So does his balls fall off? Again, what's going on here exactly behind the scenes?
Well, it's at the very least a huge abdication of Tom Tillis's duty and authority on the Senate Judiciary Committee to act as the oversight of the Department of Justice, which they did not do during the Biden regime. And now you have Ed Martin, who is going to hold accountable his predecessors, not just the use of 1512C2, but everything that they have done in that office. Matthew Graves is the one who indicted Steve Bannon. He's the one who indicted Peter Navarro. Matthew Graves, Ed Martin's predecessor, is the one who refused to work with special counsel David Weiss and the Hunter Biden prosecution for his tax crimes in Washington. So his dirty fingerprints, Matthew Graves, Ed Martin's Democrat predecessor, all over the most politically charged prosecutions from the last 4 years. And Ed Martin was starting to open up the books on that and demand accountability and even move some of these J6 prosecutors, top prosecutors, demoting them to misdemeanor cases and taking them off, of course, the closed Capitol siege, as they called it, prosecution. So why wouldn't Tom Tillis, as a senator, as a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, not see Ed Martin as a partner in bringing accountability and culpability to those in the DOJ who have completely torched that institution's once great reputation among the American people? So is Tom Tillis part of the cover-up? I'll tell you, Benny, and you know this, most Republicans wish J6 would go away. The base doesn't. Yep. But Republicans in Congress certainly do. Because, Benny, if you expose especially what happened in the J6 prosecution, the abusive selective prosecution, how they were in cahoots with top DOJ officials, obviously the Biden White House on some of these matters as well, what are Republicans going to do about it? Are they going to drag in Matthew Graves and send a criminal referral to Pam Bondi on him? Are they going to send a criminal referral to Lisa Monaco or Biden White House officials who are in cahoots with the DOJ to bring these political prosecutions with the DC U.S. Attorney's Office? So is he compromised? I don't know. He just strikes me as very stupid. Tom Tillis, just very dumb. He's obviously woefully misinformed about the circumstances of January 6th and what happened to his own constituents. But he appears to be doing the dirty work for someone here.
Wow. The dirty work for someone. I mean,
Yep.
yeah, it's like it just makes absolutely no sense. And it makes the entire Republican conference in the Senate, which has done some laudable things with multiple tough Trump confirmations. They've gotten them all across the finish line. I don't care if it's by one vote. It doesn't matter to me. It's a victory. But the retreat on this, as Josh Hawley just said on the program, the retreat on this marks some very dangerous times for President Trump in the Senate right now, with a mutiny from his own side.
Mm-hmm.
It's, if he can't get Ed Martin, if they're able to peel off more than just like the last few remaining dying McConnell wing, then you're going to have a real rough road for MAGA in the Senate.
And look, these are not Tom Tillis's constituents in North Carolina ringing up his phone in his, district offices and in Washington saying, we don't want Ed Martin. I mean, most people don't even know who Ed Martin is, right? This is really relegated to a Beltway issue. So it's not like this was an uprising in North Carolina against Ed Martin.
Right.
This is strictly a Beltway bureaucracy protection racket that Tom Tillis is leading. And now President Trump admitting he's going to have to find another nominee. Will that have to be Tom Tillis approved? Will we have to make sure that DC U.S. attorney is equally traumatized by the 4-hour protest 4.5 years ago on a Wednesday afternoon at a government building? I mean, will we have to find out what dark, dreary dreams this new nominee has about what happened that day? I mean, who in the world is going to be able to take Ed's place? Will the internal inquiry, Benny, right now ongoing about 1512C2, will that be shut down? Is that part of this? Because when the Supreme Court overturned, and I really have to emphasize this, overturned the DOJ's use of 1512C2, that is unprecedented in DOJ history. The judges and the prosecutors knew they were bastardizing the language in that statute, admittedly very vague. They knew the intention of that law was never to be used against political protesters. In fact, when George W. Bush signed that bill in 2002, he specifically said this is not to be used against political demonstrations. But here they are. They got away with it to a degree. The Supreme Court bitch slapping DOJ and these judges for allowing this to happen. Over 100 Americans spent time in federal prison on that charge alone. We deserve answers. The J6ers, most importantly, deserve answers on that. So now Tom Tillis appears to not just have ousted Ed Martin, but potentially shut down an investigation into the most abusive use of federal law against political protesters in DOJ history.
What a absolute scar on the face of North Carolina and on the Republican Party there. And I didn't expect to see this happening. And we had been lulled to sleep potentially, Julie, by getting some big like RFK and Pete Hegseth and Kash Patel and Tulsi. Everybody said that they were doomed. And so I thought Ed Martin would just be a lock. And I was so thrilled about what I saw coming out of the DC attorney's office. And to have this sabotage and then to have the capitulation here is quite a shock to us. And I really hope that there's a greater strategy here. There's something that we can't see, because otherwise it just looks like they're going to continue to use the January 6th issue to destroy President Trump and destroy his agenda. And they're going to do it from the right, which is, I guess, was always the plan. But the humiliating cuckedness and feebleness and feline nature of Republican senators continues to astonish.
It really does. I mean, this is starting to feel like Trump's first term, right? Where we had the president in the White House. He helped win a majority in the House. The Senate was Republican. It looked like rock and roll time, right?
Yeah.
And that, of course, got disabled where? With the Robert Mueller investigation. And that sabotaged potentially and tried to really end his whole presidency. And there you go, as I posted as well, Tom Tillis protecting Robert Mueller's job back in 2017, while now getting rid of Ed Martin. So, there's so much hypocrisy surrounding this as well. But Republicans in Congress better get their act together, because what they have done now, 4 months into power, is not impressing the base whatsoever. The president almost single-handedly and his cabinet doing all of the heavy lifting on the big issues that we care about. And now allowing Tom Tillis and Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins and all the others who threatened to not vote for Ed Martin, giving them a big win. This also gives the media a win, Benny. The media has targeted Ed Martin since the very beginning. His predecessor, Matthew Graves, got no media scrutiny over what he was doing in that office, aside from refusing to prosecute 67% of violent criminals who were brought to him by DC Metro Police, declining, as they call it, declination rate of 67%. That's the only coverage they got. Anything else he did, the media swooned over Matthew Graves, dragging Indiana Mimas into DC courtrooms before DC juries and getting quick convictions. But Ed Martin did not enjoy, of course, his predecessor's insular media coverage. And so this was not a mistake. This was the media, Democrats, senators like Tom Tillis and others. And there's a big reason why. And that is something else that we have to keep looking at. And I hope Ed Martin has some things to say once he leaves that office. I suspect that he will.
We do have Ed Martin's first post since the announcement that his nomination has been withdrawn by the president. It goes like this: plot twist, and it's him as the Pope. It's bittersweet, Julie, because it proves that he was the right man for the job. If you're able to so elegantly roll through these news cycles like this, it proves that you were the right guy. Right. It proves that you had the stomach for it, right? You had the iron for it all. And it makes me very angry.
Well, I've known Ed for many years before January 6th. He's a very religious man, devout man. He actually just spoke my daughter's college at Ave Maria in Naples, Florida. So he's a very faithful man. So I'm sure he will take this in stride. And I hope the president finds somewhere else to put him. Or Pam Bondi, I don't know, maybe a special counsel, special prosecutor. So I don't think his service in the Trump administration is over.
Good. Okay. Well, maybe he can be the special Epstein prosecutor. So this is Julie, I know that we've talked a little bit about this, but it does seem to be a very fascinating ball game right now. Like, who's on first, who has the Epstein documents, who has all these videos, what's going on. James Comer was on our show 2 days ago, and he said there's no Epstein documents. They've all been deleted. They've all been gotten rid of. The deep state wouldn't allow smoldering evidence to be just sit in the back room waiting for Pam Bondi and Cash to discover it. And then Pam Bondi come out with Cash Patel saying, no, we have tens of thousands of hours of tape. What's going on here? Do you think we'll ever expect to see like anything from this? And the reason why we do this style of ask these questions, that it keeps the heat up, keeps the friction up, and we might actually get a result, but I don't know.
I mean, I just don't know. There's been a lot of mixed messaging on this since the very beginning. I will say, Benny, this is not on the top of my priority list of what I would like to see out of this DOJ in terms of records and documentation and communications. I, of course, want to see January 6th, more of the lawfare into the president, everything that went down in the decision-making and the execution of the Mar-a-Lago raid, the Whitmer Fednapping hoax, which of course preceded January 6th with a lot of the same elements. So I don't really know what's going on with the Epstein files, but it seems like the messaging should at least be running the same track.
Yeah.
And, I'm sure there's a lot of sensitivities, as Pam Bondi said, protecting victims. But we want to make sure it's victims we're protecting and not influential people, which I highly doubt Attorney General Pam Bondi would be doing. But this is a wide-ranging case with a lot of moving parts that happened over decades. So I'm sure they're going to be very careful in terms of what they can release and what they can't. But I guarantee you, the American people, at least our side, regardless of what they put forward, are probably going to be disappointed.
Yeah, I mean, at some point you have to sit there and rationally ask, like, will the deep state and will these intel operations allow there to be smoking gun evidence that's just sitting in a box waiting to be found by the wrong people? And you do You do wonder about that. Okay, so what about something that happened just in recent history? The January 6th pipe bomber. Like, we got the same answer. Jim Jordan's on the show, and we get the same answer that we get every single time, right? Which is, boy, I'd like to know. And it's like, well, so would we. And nobody has come forward with anything declarative. Now, I know you know Cash very well, and I know that there's no way, and Pam, there's no, so the Epstein, so JFK documents, like, those were thrown into the river, right? They're at the bottom of the sea. Epstein a lot of these crimes were 20 years old, and so who knows what could have happened with that. The January 6th pipe bombers still alive, and as far as we know, right? Like still like hanging out, like is at a Starbucks right now. And the person who planted the bombs on January 6th, the FBI agents who degraded the footage on January 6th, the people who lied to us about the pipe bomber, they're still hanging out inside the FBI as far as we know. So here we go. Here's a hot potato. What's going on with this?
Well, look, my belief, and especially knowing Dan Bongino as I do, and how fixated he has been on the pipe bomber in his coverage and my interviews with him over the last few years, I'm sure this is a priority. But Benny, if there's anything that the Chris Wray FBI is going to hide under 10,000 layers of rock underneath the Hoover building, it is records related to the pipe bomber. Because as my friend Darren Beatty has said for years, if you expose that was part of an inside job, if you expose that was an informant, it was an undercover agent, someone associated with the government, then the entire January 6th narrative completely unravels from there. So we know this was a Fedsurrection getting.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's not your feed. It's Julie's feed that froze for just
more
a
and more
moment.
information about
There we go.
that. Oh, see, anytime we talk about this, I swear to God, there's like some glitch.
Yes,
Happens
every single
time.
Every time.
Chris Wray, I think Chris Wray is probably somewhere out in my neighborhood.
You're with the black van with the satellites on top. Julie, you're back and you're crisp and you're live, and here we go.
Yes. So anyway, if they were going to bury anything, it would be the files on the pipe bomber. But I don't, knowing also how tenacious Dan Bongino is and how committed he is to finding this out. We were hoping we would know something by now, but my guess is it's going to be much more difficult and challenging to get the information related to the investigation. As you just pointed out, we were lied to about the footage. They doctored the footage. We've already demonstrated that. Stephen D'Antuono, who was head of the Washington FBI field office, lied to Congress, saying that one of the cell phone files, data collections that they got from a cell phone provider, had been destroyed or disrupted. The cell phone providers came back to Representative Barry Loudermilk and said, that's not true. We have all the files. If you want our data from January 5th and 6th, we have it. So there's just one cover up, one lie, one misrepresentation over another here. So they are, like I said, if there's anything that they lacked behind many, many locks and keys and threw away the keys and threw away the doors and everything else, it's about the J6 pipe bomber. But I still trust Dan Bongino and Kash Patel that they are not going to give up until they find something.
I want to give you an opportunity to respond to the criticisms of Kash and Dan, because not only do I view people like Dan as a mentor, and Kash has been a regular on this program, but also the sheer magnitude of work that is required to bring a criminal conviction, one that sticks, to build not a synthetic house, but a real house, one that stands, charges that can bring people in handcuffs. This is lots of work, and not only that, you're having to steer the barge that was already headed downstream, the 2,000-ton barge. You have to stop all of that momentum and then turn it about. And there's been criticism of the speed of this happening. And I know that you understand sort of the inner workings here better than perhaps any person alive, given the fact that you've spent hundreds, maybe thousands of hours now in J6 cases, observing these judges, observing the FBI and the prosecutors in these cases and so on. That you've seen the infrastructure up close that's been built. And so maybe just giving you an open floor to speak to the criticisms of Cash and Dan for not going fast enough.
Well, and thank you for that. So I think Cash has been there, 10 or 12 weeks, maybe. I think Dan has been there 8 weeks. And in the time between even before the president won until they took their positions at the FBI, just think of what top FBI officials, from Chris Wray to his deputies to his little foot soldiers at all 56 FBI field offices, especially Washington. Just imagine the mischief that they were up to in the months preceding Cash and Dan taking over the FBI. So they've been going in blind, and intentionally so. That's how the FBI, his predecessor, set that up. So first of all, you have to figure out your priority list. Who are you going to investigate first? What are you going to investigate first? How are we going to collect the evidence? Who are we going to talk to within the Bureau and outside the Bureau? And let's say you get all the evidence that you want to charge who? Stephen D'Antuono, let's just say this hypothetically, the former Washington FBI field director, for lying to Congress and who knows whatever other chicanery related to the pipeline issue. You have to go before a grand jury and get an indictment. Well, in this case, you would have to go before a DC grand jury. Grand juries are made up of the same people who make up trial juries. So think about that. You've got almost 100% Democrats sitting on a grand jury who are going to determine whether to hand up an indictment that the Trump DOJ wants against former members of the Biden DOJ. So that is a huge obstacle in and of itself. And look, we've already seen reporting. Ed Martin tried to get a warrant, a search warrant on Citibank related to that $20 billion slush fund. You had a magistrate judge in DC, the same magistrate judge, by the way, who has signed off on hundreds of arrest warrants for J6ers. She denied his request, saying, no, I need more information. This doesn't seem right. We shouldn't subpoena Citibank or send them a letter to halt the disbursement of this money. You had an article in the New York Times last week, top DOJ officials seeking an investigation into the pro-Hamas terror group on Columbia's campus. Not only were they thwarted by career DOJ employees and lawyers, 2 federal judges refused to allow the DOJ to move forward with a search warrant to find out the membership list and get data from Instagram on who that membership is, citing First Amendment concerns. And this is just what we already know publicly reported. Imagine what's going on behind the scenes. So maybe you go before a DC grand jury and you bring all the information and they refuse, they give you a no bill, meaning, no, we're not giving you the indictment. Well, then what? Do you go tell the American people that? Plus, if all these investigations are going to happen in Washington, D.C., look at the judges that they have to deal with. Who oversees grand jury proceedings? The chief judge of the DC District Court. That would be Jeb Busford. You think he's going to give the Trump DOJ or FBI a fair shake in investigations into his own people? No. So this is just one angle of the formidable, almost overwhelming, daunting challenge that Cash and Dan, as well as Pam Bondi and her top DOJ officials, have in terms of creating and bringing forth any sort of criminal case against these former Democratic operatives.
Goodness. All right. Well, I mean, Julie, I have to pivot to one final topic that's top of my news feed, and that's just chilling. Your breakdown there is it's depressing, frankly.
Sorry.
Boy, no, I mean, on some level, it's impressive how Democrats have been able to take this fake state that isn't even real and to stack all of their power up so high in that fake state. Washington, D.C. is a rat-infested cesspool. It shouldn't even exist. It's not a real place. I've lived there for 15 years. It's awful. One of the most mismanaged things. If it were a country, it'd be like Haiti and its atrocious mismanagement. The point is that they were able to see that as a vector of power, and they were able to stack so high the cards against us there, that they can get whatever they want. They can rule in total fiefdom fashion. And so on some level, it's like the banality of it, the banality of the evil is almost impressive. Okay, so moving very quickly to the Supreme Court and to Norm Eisen and his strange relationship with John Roberts. And John Roberts getting sued right now, actually, over that relationship and over his relationship with the executive by America First Legal. I'm not sure if you've examined that lawsuit. It made a lot of news, as has, if you really look at the relationship with John Roberts, I mean, he's vacationing for months with the guy who funded all of the lawfare against Donald Trump. That seems insane. And we have a Revolver news story on it right here. We wanted to get your take on it because you're sharp as a tack on these things, Julie. What are we to think of John Roberts and his stewardship of this court?
I mean, I think universally everyone is very disappointed and almost depressed about John Roberts's handling of his court. And he apparently gave some remarks just last night talking about the importance of the judiciary and its independence and being a check on excessive congressional and executive power. And we are the Constitution. Okay, well, what does that mean? You just intervened in a case, in a strictly executive branch case of the president determining whether our country was under an invasion or predatory incursion by a hostile regime, the Maduro regime, using members of Tren de Aragua and importing them into this country in huge, unprecedented numbers. I mean, Benny, in 2023, Venezuela was second only to Mexico in terms of the number of migrants crossing our southern border illegally to come into America. Venezuelans were coming here en masse, like we saw during the Biden regime. And we know that the Maduro regime, also connected to Iran, works its way in these countries in Central and South America, and now the US, by using TDA. But you had the Supreme Court, John Roberts, step in and stop the president from exercising his right under the Alien Enemies Act to declare an invasion and target these Venezuelan illegals for immediate removal from this country, deeming them a threat to public safety and national security, which of course they are. So then you have John Roberts last night opining, patting himself on the back, pretending that he is the only arbiter and interpreter of the Constitution. This is a true crisis, Benny, not just at the Supreme Court, but throughout our federal judiciary, watching how these judges are not just making decisions, but the comments that they are making. You have unelected, ignorant district court judges like this Charlotte Sweeney in Colorado. She's been a judge for 3 years. She was never in the government. She was never a prosecutor. She has no foreign policy experience, on her own, determining that the president was wrong to designate TDA as a foreign terror organization, that there is no incursion or invasion. Who are you to say that? And now you've had other judges say that as well, because John Roberts gave them the green light on April 7th when he intervened and stopped the president basically from using the Alien Enemies Act in the way that every president can and should be able to do so. So this is a true crisis. And honestly, I don't know what we do from here. There are not a lot of good answers except just completely ignoring what these judges are doing and saying.
Yeah, I mean, our judge is going to send their armies to stop Trump. I mean, at some level, why does Joe Biden get a right to do this? He was cheered from the rooftop when Joe Biden was like, "No, F it, I'm just going to forgive all the student loans. Don't care what you say." Mm-hmm. Now, on some level, you gotta scratch your head and say, we either have a presidency or we don't. And if we have a presidency, then he has the right to protect the homeland, and he's the commander in chief. He has designated powers, and the crisis is in judicial overreach into Article 2, not in what Trump's doing. The crisis is clearly in what the courts are doing to Trump. But yeah,
that's right. And we had another Republican senator, another favorite, Jim Lankford, James from Oklahoma. Boy, the Oklahoma senators yesterday, they really shine through. Let's just say that. So he was doing an interview, and he also said that these illegals should be afforded due process. No, they shouldn't. You came here illegally.
Oh man.
Many of you are criminals. And this is an outrage in cities across the country, especially minority communities who are outraged at these migrants, illegals, setting up in camps or corners or wherever they want to rest their head, or set up their little mini TDAs or their little mini MS-13 gang enclaves. And so, I mean, but the judiciary are the ones who are now empowering that. And so Jim Langford saying, yeah, they all deserve due process. I think there's already a 5-year backlog in court hearings on asylum claims. So I guess the 10 or 12 million that Joe Biden let into the country, they're just going to be here till we satisfy Senator Langford's devotion to imaginary due process for people who cross this border illegally under the former regime, and just get to stay here until they want to go home, I suppose.
I think they should increase. I think there's like 2 or 3 women who are Republican senators. I think you could just increase those numbers by having some of these senators just come out as just feminine and feline and so weak and so weepy.
Tranny senators.
Right? Yeah, I think you could just identify. You just say I identify. James Langford would be a good start, man. That guy finds himself on the wrong side of every single bill,
Pretty
on the wrong
much.
side of every. What a tool! They're all tools. They truly are. And unfortunately, it's what we have to deal with right now.